In this video, we're going to talk about the open hi-hat sound. This is a sound that you want to sizzle. It should be shimmery, and you get that sound by opening it just enough so that the cymbals vibrate together. As you can see, we've changed out the cymbals. This is a whole new set of cymbals. These are A Zildjian cymbals, as opposed to before we had the K suites. Now these hi-hats are called the master sound hi-hats, and these are 14 inches in diameter, which is the most common diameter for hi-hats. The K suites we had were 15s, so they're a little bit darker, a little bit thinner as well. These are a little heavier to give you really, really good clean articulation, and the pitch is just a little bit brighter. Most drummers play many different types of cymbals for different situations. These particular cymbals are really good in high volume situations, like in a rock context or something like that, because they're pretty high pitched and they cut. They're loud and they cut through music like loud amplifiers pretty easily. They can stay on top of the mix of the music, and that's why they're served well in that situation. To get a great open hi-hat sound, you need to learn how to put the right amount of pressure when you're opening the hi-hats. If you open them too far, you'll only get the sound of the top cymbal. If you don't open them far enough, you won't get enough sustain. So we mentioned earlier that you want to have about an inch in between your two cymbals, but you don't open them all the way when you play an open hi-hat sound. You just relieve some pressure from your foot, enough so that the cymbals can vibrate freely and sizzle together. When you're using the open hi-hat sound in the context of a groove, there are two basic sounds that you can get. If you're playing on the tip of the stick and you open it, you'll get a clean, more articulate sound. If you use the shoulder of the stick on the edge, you'll get a bigger, kind of trashier sound. You always want a clean sound at the end of your open hi-hat sound, so in order to be able to get that, you have to press down as soon as you want that sound to stop. Typically, you're going to press down on the next beat. So if you open on the and of 4, you're going to close it on beat 1. That sounds like this. Another thing to be careful of is when you're closing the cymbal with your foot, if you continue to play with the stick, you can sort of flam those notes, which you don't want to do. So try to get them right even together. Now you can get a clean sound from the top of the hi-hat using the tip of the stick, and you can still get a bigger, washier open hi-hat sound by using the shoulder. You just have to then move the stick down so that you can hit the shoulder on the edge. I'll play a couple of open hi-hat notes just using the tip, and then I'll stay on the tip and then use the shoulder only for the open notes, and you'll be able to hear the difference in those sounds. The open hi-hat sound is notated with a little circle above the hi-hat note. Now, it's generally expected that you're going to close that hi-hat on the next beat, whatever next beat is printed on the hi-hat. But sometimes people will also notate exactly where they want you to close it. So this is done sometimes with a plus sign on the next eighth note or the next note, and sometimes it's even notated as a footnote down on the bottom of the staff. We're going to play some exercises that are notated in 2/4 time. That just means that there are 2 beats in a measure. Notice there are 4 eighth notes on the screen, and there's an open sign above the and of 1, and then we close the hi-hats on beat 2, so that's notated with a footnote on beat 2. Now let's try that together, and remember that the opening of the hi-hat and the closing of the hi-hat has to happen in time so that you get that open sound only on the and of 1, and it closes right on beat 2. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Now let's add the bass drum on beat 1. And in this example, you're going to kind of feel this walking pattern because your bass drum is going down on beat 1 and your left foot is going down on beat 2. 1, 2, ready, go. Now let's add the backbeat on beat 2, and notice that on beat 2 you have 3 limbs landing at the same time. The snare drum with the left hand, the hi-hat with the right hand, and the hi-hat with the foot. So make sure all 3 of those elements are right together. 1, 2, ready, go. Now let's add another note on the bass drum on the and of 1. Now this can be a little funny because the left foot is coming up on the and of 1, but the right foot is coming down. One really important thing I want you to pay attention to is make sure you're centered and you're seated on the throne and you're comfortable, that you're not moving around or leaning one way or another. You want to just sit comfortably and just use your feet on the pedals to make this happen. 1, 2, ready, go. Now we're going to do that same thing, but we're going to add in the backbeat. 1, 2, ready, go. Let's do one more variation on the bass drum. Hi-hat's going to be opened in the same spot, and we're going to keep the snare drum in. 1, 2, ready, go. You can open the hi-hat on any beat in the measure. There are lots of different variations. You hear it often on the and of 4. Sometimes you hear it open on all of the ands or all of the upbeats, like in disco music. Some people refer to this as pea soup. 1, 2, ready, go. Sometimes you're going to want to play the open hi-hat note on the downbeat. This makes it a little bit tricky for the coordination because now you're playing the downbeat with the bass drum and opening the hi-hat with the left foot on the downbeat and then closing the hi-hat on the and. It sounds like this. 1, 2, ready, go. Now when I add the backbeat in, I need to make sure that that hi-hat is closing right on the and of 1, so it's out of the way for when I play beat 2. Sounds like this. 1, 2, ready, go. There are many different permutations of where you can open the hi-hat in a measure, and many of those are notated out in the book. But we're going to go back to 4/4 time, and we're going to play the most common place where you see it opened, which is on the and of 4. Now, with this example, the hi-hat is closing with the foot on the downbeat, on 1. We're not going to notate that closing because at this point we just know it's closed on the next beat. So I'm going to play a groove, and I'm going to open on the and of 4, close it on 1. Grab your sticks and play this one along with me. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. Let's try another example. Here you'll notice that the open hi-hat is now on the and of 3, and there's no backbeat on beat 2. Let's try it. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. Here's a common groove you hear with cross stick on all 4 beats where the hi-hat is opened on the and of 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. At this point, you can take any of the grooves that we've worked on and you can insert some open hi-hat notes into those grooves anywhere you want. And they will make the grooves sound different, and it will also create some different coordination challenges as you go through that, because you're opening and closing in different spots, and with certain bass drum patterns that might be more difficult than with other bass drum patterns. Since we're already playing a note with our foot in the hi-hat, sometimes you can play just the hi-hat with the foot and leave the hand out. Here's an example of a groove where I leave the hand out on the note where the hi-hat closes with the foot. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. When utilizing this technique of playing the note with the foot instead of the hand, it actually frees you up to be able to play a different type of open hi-hat sound. It's a little easier to then use the shoulder or reach down to the edge of the cymbals, because you have that extra time where you're playing the note with your foot to get back to the groove. Sometimes if we're playing a sound that's slightly open and a sloshy hi-hat sound, that can be notated as a circle with a slash through it. Even if we're playing a groove with that sound in the hi-hats, it's still possible to open a little bit further to change that texture and add an open hi-hat sound to an already pretty sloshy sound. Here's an example of that sound. 1, 2, ready, go. You're definitely going to want to spend some time experimenting with how much pressure you need in your foot to get the sound that you want out of the hi-hat. Even if you're playing a groove on the ride cymbal, you can still utilize the texture of the open hi-hat sound. Now, to be able to do that without breaking from the ride cymbal, you're going to have to play the open hi-hat with your left hand. So you just reach back. It's similar to coming to the floor tom from over here like we did before, but now you're reaching over to the hi-hat with the left hand and then bringing it back to the snare drum. Let's try it. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. I want to make sure it's clear that right now I'm opening the hi-hat a lot because that's a specific technique that we're working on. But in the context of music, you're probably not going to open the hi-hat that much unless you're playing a disco tune or something like that. But usually in a longer phrase, which might be 4 or even 8 bars, there might only be one open hi-hat note on the and of 4 in the 8th bar in that entire phrase. So sometimes it's used almost as like a fill sound when the music is really sparse and you don't want to play a whole fill. One little open hi-hat can be enough of a change in the music that it kind of acts like a fill. In addition to practicing all these different variations of where to open the hi-hat and how to open it and how much pressure and the different ways to play it, I want to make sure you spend some time listening to music and zero in specifically on the drummer's hi-hat. What's going on? Are there open notes? Is it closed? Is it tight? What kind of sounds is that drummer getting? And I would encourage you also to listen to music that you maybe don't typically listen to and see if you can identify some of those things. As well as in music that you've heard a lot of times, you might hear it in a totally different way when you focus in on something like the hi-hat. In the next lesson, we're going to dive into two new strokes that I've actually been playing already this whole time, but we haven't really talked about: the controlled stroke and the upstroke.